Thanks for tuning in to Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, your secret weapon for all things digital and products and manufacturing. In this episode, Jonathan and Jen welcome back Jennifer Herron from Action-Based Engineering to take a deeper dive into the challenges around managing change when it comes to models and digital transformation. They discuss the mindset shift that is needed when it comes to change management and how driving change around any established process can be a difficult task without the right team in place. As usual, this is an enlightening and entertaining conversation with this trio. Tune in and you'll be sure to glean a few pearls of wisdom.
Welcome back, everybody, to Stay Sharp, the podcast about all things digital related to products and manufacturing. I am joined today by my co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hi, everybody.
And we also have our guest today, Jennifer Herron. Jennifer, you want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself to this? Although this is a podcast, second podcast of two, not everybody may have listened to the first one. So go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of what you do, your experience, and your work at Action Engineering.
Okay, I will. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me back. This will be fun. So I am Jennifer Herron. I'm the CEO and founder of Action Engineering. I am also a double-degreed engineer in mechanical and computer engineering, which, I don't know, makes me, I guess, uniquely qualified for this crazy world of CAD and digital space, I suppose.
Absolutely.
My background is in aerospace, design activities, mostly around spacecraft design, and I've also done unmanned ground vehicle research and development work, primarily automating mechanical systems for automation. That was a bit ago, before we had self-driving cars, but it was a precursor to self-driving cars. So, and Action Engineering is a company that helps organizations transform into leveraging 3D data or CAD models or any other derivative of those native CAD models to the best of the abilities and their budgets within their organizations. And most of the time we focus on manufacturing activities, design, manufacturing, and inspection. And a lot of times we're looking at sustainment use cases as well, but kind of two big buckets of activities that happen in the life cycle of products.
So I'm so glad you're back, Jennifer, because that, your area of expertise is so central to what we are talking about when we talk about digital technologies in this space. And last time, we toured over all kinds of things, right? And our theme was around model-based enterprise and how model-based definition and model-based design and BD and this area that you really focused on, how it connects to the wider enterprise. And I think, when we were talking about, so what do we dig into next? I mean, because there's a lot. There's a lot we could dig into.
It's a lot. That's right.
The theme that we came up with, and I'm excited to dig into this today, is, let's talk about the process that pulls all this together, because there's so many changes we need to think about making, that people are making, to how they do product development and manufacturing and those kinds of things. Let's talk about the central process to a lot of that. And I think that process is release and change, right? So product release, all the release of whether it's drawings, models, designs, whatever you call it, and the change that then happens subsequently when you need to revise, update, change a supplier, whatever it might be. But that business process of release and change, I feel like that's a great place to jump back into the topic, right? So I'm hoping that's what we can do today.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. And it's good that you bring up the business case, because the business value is going to drive everything. Businesses don't do things because it's fun and cool. Well, some do, but I'm not sure.
If you got a little budget, you might do some fun stuff just because it's cool. But You're right. It doesn't turn into a real business-changing activity, project, whatever, unless there's an economic reason.
That's right.
It's interesting. I think you can start because things are, you're going to make money, and it's cool and fun. But once you get into change, then it becomes hard.
It's not cool.
That's right.
So,
it's not cool.
And it's costly.
Drudgery.
So
and it's costly.
Where are we now? How do we make it easier so that we can get back to doing things because they're cool and they're fun. And yes, they make money along the way as well.
Right. And I think that we talked about the only thing constant is change. And so you're always releasing, you're always changing all of your product data all the time. And you're incorporating new derivatives of the product data over time, which is one of the, I think, the fundamental concepts of digital twin that's so interesting and intriguing, but also super scary and plunges us into the data lake full of
Stop
dead
doing
fish and dead
Algae.
fish and live fish and, clean and dirty water. Yeah. So how do you manage all that? How do you see yourself through all that chaos? And I think you have to do it by doing business in a different way than you are doing it today.
Right.
Because if you're going to do same old, well, then just do same old, same old. Why would you put a lot of effort into creating data that's very dynamic, editable, changeable quickly, but then still have the output artifact be a 2D drawing that's dumb and non-dynamic and non-easy to change quickly? So we really have to change the mindset around those business activities that we're doing right now.
I think you're saying something. I want to be explicit about it, or maybe I'm just saying it a different way, is all the technology change that we are talking about related to MBD and using models in a release and change process. People will talk about the benefit of that being, it's going to save us time and it's going to make things clearer and all those kinds of things. If you don't have an objective in mind that says how you're going to use these new capabilities, how it's really going to save time, how you're going to behave differently to make it save you time, you might be missing the point. And it comes back to that business case piece. Like, changing the way our engineering change process works means you want to get something out of it. You're not going to do it unless people say, yeah, man, if you could take a week out of a 6-week process by how you're doing things, I'm all on board. What does that mean? Right? Changing the tech underneath isn't going to get you there. You've got to decide to use it in a specific way to save that week. And that's what you're getting at, right? Like change for the sake of change isn't going to help.
No. And I also think that very detailed process analyses steps that often are done are daunting. How do I say this? Let's see. So you can spend a whole lot of time going detailed process analysis of your, let's call it the change process of, from first release to the first revision. You can do a detailed process mapping because most organizations do not have that documented well.
Correct.
It's
they think
always
they do.
The first thing. Yeah. They think they do until you go, great, where is it? And they go, I don't know. Okay.
Right.
So let's map it out. And
you should talk to Tim. He knows.
You should talk to Tim. Bob, I think Julie did that last week, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm not being succinct, but often we spend a lot of time detailed process mapping. There is a level of just get out 80% of the process map in a very fast way, like in a 2-hour session with all the subject matter people in the room. Get that out in a high enough level, and everybody goes, yeah. That's basically what we did. Then you can go in and you can refine it. You can have experts like you guys and us come in and say, okay, now here are the things you can change to knock out these 9 steps, and that's going to be your biggest value. So if you do this quick process assessment, and then have experts come in and help to just cut out those steps right away, you're not in this like analysis paralysis of implementation about how to go from where you're at now to the future state. You can kind of leapfrog kind of the initial implementation steps. So
I think you avoid some dangerous things too, right? To your point,
yes,
if you get
and
too in the weeds,
things,
you get too in the weeds, you get people who are suddenly, wait, that's my area, that's my domain. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to change that. I mean, you can get into a lot of dangerous things. So to your point, good enough process map.
Yeah. And so case in point, everybody is really excited right now about digital quality opportunities, especially in automation, because CMM programming and writing quality plans is a very labor intensive thing. So there's a lot of excitement around those digital thread automation opportunities, and rightly so. There are massive savings to be had, like on the 80% numbers. The problem with that is that is predicated on a lot of very, 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 very good data. Mm-hmm. On the design side, it clearly identifies the dimensional requirements, the performance requirements, whatever the requirements are. Then your quality cycle, where you're validating and testing all that and verifying, that again is predicated on really good digital data. So that's hard. Engineering or changes, managing changes, that's something we can quickly take advantage of a lot of the digital tools now. I can compare a bill of materials from a previous revision to the current revision. I can compare the geometry from a previous revision to a current revision, and I can automatically build a change report and get that done quickly so that those loops, those reporting steps are not as painful as they were back when I was doing spacecraft design and had to create these crazy was now Word documents and then stand up in front of a change board and get it approved. Yeah. It's fine to get it approved. I think that's important. The approval steps are important, but if you can document the reporting and the communication methods faster, which you can if you're leveraging 3D digital tools, then I think that's a really important step. And it's something that people can implement quickly and get value out of, I'll just put in quotes, model-based data, whatever that means, because there's layers of fidelity of the kind of model-based data. And you can build some quick interest in that and get people used to a faster change cycle using 3D data.
I think you're bringing up a great case in point. So let's dive into that one for a minute, because I think each time we get into this topic, it's good that we're setting the context and talking about the broad view and the business case and those kinds of things. But I think there's a lot of value for our listeners when we get into the weeds of, like you just said, you're doing a change, the analysis of is, right? Or what happened in this change. That's a really concrete example. I think a lot of people are going to latch right onto it, be like, yeah, you're right. That's like a week in our process. And they have challenges around, well, we try to give that to a junior engineer because it feels like drudgery. But we have to have a senior engineer look at it because the junior engineer isn't always going to have the context to know what needs to be in there or what a certain thing means. But you're bringing up this excellent point. Last time, and I think even with your quality example, in the model-based world, in this digital world, we spend some time talking about, well, the models can be for machines. And sometimes we have to sort of create views or create representations for the humans. But nonetheless, the digital data, the model data, you can use in a variety of ways. Well, here's an example, this is, that you're still keeping the human interaction. We're not talking about, letting the machine make the decision about the change. But we're going to automate something. We're going to make something simpler for the humans to make the decision. So, we're in that box.
We're replacing the drudgery so that people have time to do the smart stuff.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not about creating a 3D model that you can feed into the CMM machine and it just tells you if it meets the requirements or not. So not that kind of input, but it's, hey, take all that digital information and summarize it for me, analyze it for me, help me understand the information I need to make the decision. So this is a great one, right? Great example.
Right. And then if you really want to, throw that thread out to the future and layer on AI.
That's where the whole time I'm thinking I'm not going to mention it because I want to keep this focused. But yes, you're right.
Well, yeah. And of course you can. And of course it makes my eyes roll back in my head every time. Let's add AI to, okay. Yeah. And.
Right.
And but you have to have a really clear understanding about what it is you're doing before you send it into automated AI because AI is actually built on an algorithm. You have to build an algorithm for the machine learning and the decision tree to occur. Right. You don't understand that, you're going to get not the right results on the back end. So those are really important to understand.
Let's talk about an example there. Let's tie all that together. I'm going to throw one out there because I have been very skeptical of the application of ML and AI to this case.
Yeah,
right? And I'm skeptical of it in general.
Me too. Right.
I'm skeptical in general about its application to engineering because of safety and risk of life and that kind of thing. But I will say, all right, I've been convinced. Here's a use case. Okay, so we're making a change. We've got to change to our bill of material. We're replacing component A with component B. And when we do, component B on its own doesn't get replaced. It's actually component B plus component C. So this is the first step, is when we go to do the automation you talked about, which is, hey, can we have the machines help with that if we've got the right digital data? If you had that bill of material as a set of records in a database or something discrete so that the machine could understand A went away, B and C came in. Okay, first thing is, did B and C come in because A went away, or B came in because A went away, and C was just a concurrent change we introduced because it made sense? Right. So there's intent that maybe our machines can't help us with.
Well, and you said a very important word, which is discrete, which means everything has to be a 0 or a 1. And I don't think we understand as an industry, as product manufacturing, discrete manufacturing builders, I don't think we all understand how much we are making on-the-fly decisions and very gray area, non-discrete business decisions, design decisions, engineering choices, engineering-based decisions. I don't think we have any idea what we're actually doing in our brain. And we think we're being discrete because we have our own little, we engineers think we're very smart, clear, right. But I don't think we know. And I think that this would be really super interesting to do a social science experiment on this. What is it that's really happening, right, with all that decision-making process? And then I think you have to become aware that what you have right now is not discrete. Therefore, it really can't go in directly into automation. You can start pulling out little chunks that make sense, like the engineering changes, comparing geometries, super robust, lots of technologies available to do that. So why not leverage that? Because people aren't. They're not doing it in a robust way that makes their engineering changes faster.
But I think, you're hitting on a good word. Another one I'll add to that is explicit versus implicit, right? That a decision was made and you think explicitly it's right there, right? We went from this to that and the reason was a failure mode and whatever. And it's like, no, the decision actually came from the conversation that happened outside of the PLM or PDM system. It happened in a meeting. It was not in the notes, all those kinds of things. So it's discrete so that machines can process it and deal with it. But it's also, is it even captured? Right?
Why?
Some
of
the process, the why, exactly. Or even if all the data's there, is it connected? And this is the place, so I'm going to come back to what I said about, I'm skeptical of AI, but there's a place where it can fit, where I understand, is sometimes the machine, it may not understand the why, but it can still do the pattern matching to help the human connect the why. So, for example, my B replaces A thing, and C came along, and it was in the change also. If you have enough data, this is a huge if. Let's assume for a minute, huge company, we do have enough data. We have replaced A with B and added C enough times that an AI tool had enough data set to be trained on that it learned and saw a pattern and it could recommend that to us. So the next time A comes along and we've got a gear in a change process, and we said the gear's failing, it said, I would like to propose that you have that gear made out of metal instead of ceramic, and it's going to need grease. So that's my A, B, and C, right? Okay, great. Because now the human can look at it and say, I didn't think about the grease. I'm glad the machine reminded me to look at that. Now, the machine had no idea why the grease mattered. There was not something explicit that says, well, there's a lubricant issue if you do that, right? It's just the machine said, hey, something to think about.
Right. So in that situation, if I'm a spacecraft designer and that database is trained on automotive applications, that grease may be completely inappropriate for space applications.
Exactly.
Right. So, and that's where we, the engineers, still play the role, but we're getting feedback that we didn't have before. Now, how accurate and how good is that feedback is still really important. And we still have to be really smart. So we don't have to give up our smarts, which is going to make engineers real happy. So,
right.
Well, in theory, you could argue
ahead.
that we have to be smarter.
Right.
Because
we do have to be smarter.
We're pulling in this additional information
and
and suggestions. And, well, wait, is that a good suggestion? Is that about it? Like, is there anything in my database, in my head, that counteracts that suggestion?
Exactly.
Well, and experience plays a huge role in that. In fact, I read a book years and years ago called Blink, and it's about the experienced consultant or just experienced expert in a certain subject matter, and they can walk in and tell you what's wrong. They couldn't tell you like where all that came from or why, but I can tell you what's wrong with that. And I think we have to acknowledge that there's something really important about our brains that are happening that we definitely don't understand. That's a whole other thing.
Right. But you're bringing up a great point about what is this process we're describing, right? And I know I love actually the fact that we're kind of diving in and off to the side. But this is really important stuff. The notion that AI could help us in engineering and product development to augment what we do, not replace what we do, makes this a lot more palatable in my mind, right?
Yeah.
So it's the junior engineer who's going, hey, I noticed that we usually add grease whenever I don't know why, but I noticed that. So the senior engineer can say, I'm glad you reminded me because yes, I know why, and we can connect the dots. Well, that actually solves the problem that is in my mind, the risk in my mind of how AI applies to product development, which is, it is not, if it pattern matches, that's great, but we need the why to go justify what's being done, to go check it, to go validate it, all those things. And that's where, the two can work together. We can get something better by putting these together.
Your pattern matching is bringing up another good example that people are really ignoring in the digital thread world, and that's geometric searching. Because I am a mechanical engineer, and therefore I literally think in pictures and I think in 3D. But so I'm always like, what I'm looking for, I'm like, it looks like this. So I would like to be able to go sketch out what I'm looking for in the part in my search window and say, find me the things that look like this in these materials in this size. So we can do that. Nobody uses it, but we can do that technologically speaking, and we're not. But it's a really important thing. And a very important use case that is being missed in the digital thread aspects. And what we're doing is matching the way all of the mechanical engineers think right off the bat. And that, there's I think I said this maybe last time, the statistic of, engineers are spending 75% of their time searching for their information. And I'm like, what the hell is the number? I don't remember the part number, and then you get the guys that I was initially trained by. Well, part of learning all the part number, you will know all the numbers and they will just be at your, fingertip, and that's how you'll identify it. And then we end up with smart part numbers.
Right.
Which is another whole other subject.
Another horrible invention, but yes.
Another horrible invention that was invented for a purpose, and we no longer need it, because if I can geometric search and search by material and filter by all sorts of other things, why would I do that? Yeah. And so I think it's important, right? Like look for the easier use cases that may not be a super, again, I'll use the word sexy, which, they're not as exciting. As exciting use cases on the back end. And no, they're not at 80% time savings. But those little quick wins up front will start building your organizational change management, to get motivated to say, well, what else can we do with this digital data? And then you don't have to fight so much on the why. Because it's really expensive to fight on the why.
It is.
It's extremely expensive.
Your case of geometric search, I love it, because I think it comes back to something we touched on last time, and I think we're also getting at by looking at this release and change process, which is you have to think about transforming how you do work. So let me explain what thought you prompted when you said that. It's always. Since I've seen geometric search introduced by the major vendors, it's always been tough for them to make the case about, so where does it fit, right? Which is why I don't think we're adopting it, is we haven't found the right place for it to fit in the process. I think there's also a piece which is we may need to change our process for it to make sense. So here's one. I'll throw
Yes.
out my nugget for what I'm thinking, and maybe some of the major players are listening and they'll implement this and it'll be great. If I'm a designer in CAD, I think it would be great as I'm putting in my first extrude and I'm putting in my first hole and I'm making that loft and I'm starting to have a take shape, that in the background when I'm hitting save, if that was going to a server somewhere that wasn't interrupting my workflow process and it was doing a shape-based search and it was, not interrupting me, but in the background, in the side, whatever, coming to me with, hey, by the way, I sort of like an engineer at my door in my cubicle, like, hey, I noticed what was on your screen. We made one of those last year. One of those is already in production. We've got a volume of 1,000 pieces a year, and all of the dimensioning, the tolerancing's been done, the quality standards. We've got 3 suppliers.
Almost like a filtering of images as you're designing it. So as it, like if you start with a block, then you've got like on the side a bunch of different blocks. But then as you put in, an extrusion, or you put then it starts automatically updating the wow.
And if you're thinking, I like your, it's almost like there's a little engineer sitting on your shoulder going, oh, I'm thinking about, and then we get into like sort of a collaborative engineering approach that it's your digital engineering assistant taking a look at what you're looking for and then coming back around with some interesting solutions. Your Amazon cart. Oh, I noticed you were looking
what I was
for.
Thinking, like, people that bought that
you could
also
travel
bought this.
with. Yes, right. Exactly.
That's right.
And
people who've made this geometry.
Yeah, it's in stock. Or better. Oh, I like this one, Jonathan. Oh, you're modeling a fastener again. How about you use this in your library instead of wasting your effing time?
We don't need to get all UI doesn't need to get all judgy. That's not necessary.
Maybe it does. Maybe it does.
Maybe it should. Maybe it should. It should be judgmental. We think you're wasting the company money. I think that was a Dr.
Then
Who
you can tie in
episode.
metrics, and if they,
But doesn't it?
Yeah.
It begs the question, though. You have to be thinking about your process differently, because one of the things that challenges immediately, right?
Yes.
As an engineer, when I was doing engineering work, I would have been like, look, stay out of my lane. This is what I do. I know reasons why that's not going to work. But you know what? If you step away from that and you open up your sort of aperture on as a business, what are we doing?
Yes.
It's tough.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people who are in the weeds every day to back away from what they're in the weeds from. And so you really need an outside observer to come in and say, well, I saw you walk back and forth from here to there 50 times. I don't know, it's the Gordon Ramsay of...
Right.
Maybe not Gordon Ramsay, but, what if you moved, your water station over here instead, and now you're more efficient. So I think those outside perspectives, whether they're coming from within your company or outside your company, are important. They just got to be outside you being in the weeds. And yeah, that's important.
But to Jonathan's point, it's the outside perspective is important, but you also have to be receptive to the input.
Amen.
And that's one of the things we talked about the last time is that, it's a people characteristic, but like engineers and of a certain generation are less likely to more control is more important and less likely to collaborate. So might be less receptive, less receptive than Gen X Gen Z. Sorry, Gen X.
Yeah, I think we're Gen X.
Yeah, we're the problem.
We're the problem.
We are the.
We're part of the problem.
We're part of the problem. And I totally agree. And this is actually one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I think the transformation of mindset goes along with all this transformation of process and technology and data, is that we are not leveraging younger generations to have that increased collaborative mindset. And they do it really, really well. Because of the technologies that they are used to and have taken advantage of. And we alluded to this, I think, in the last podcast when we were talking about Google Doc collaboration and how for Gen Z and a portion of the millennial generation, that was like the norm for their educational experience. So we've already hardwired them to be that way. Now we just need to use them that way. And I don't think we're being clever enough about that because, again, we're controlling and stubborn, and we think we know better. And I don't think we do.
I think we can use that mindset also to help steer our vendors in this space, right? So that conversation we had last time, I'm going to just recap it quickly because I want to dive into it for a minute. The idea that folks who use Google Docs are perfectly comfortable with, I'm in a doc, you're in a doc, you changed what I just did, I didn't like it, I changed it back. To me as a Gen Xer, it feels a little bit like a battle and a conflict and but to people who are comfortable with it, it doesn't, right? So they have a different mindset. But it brings up, I think, some interesting points about engineering where maybe that Google Doc way of working isn't exactly right, but there are some very valid concepts we need to bring in. It's just that we need our tools, our digital tools, to change the way they work today and be a little more Google Doc-like. So I want to just dive in. My thought is, I'm an engineer, I'm designing a part. I put a lot of thought into why that tolerance is there, why it is the way that it is. So to have somebody come in and just change it, and I missed the fact that they changed it, and now the part went out and it's got the wrong tolerance. This is the stuff we're afraid of that holds us back from making these kind of changes, right? And we're talking about this in the context of the change process. So I'm going to bring this home to what we were just saying. If we're really going to save time, a tool like that would let us save time. I set what I want. Somebody else says, no, I know better. I change it. Do we still have a place to catch it? Sure. The business process can still say, let's have a review where we come together. Or the software could highlight to me, because it knows I set the tolerance originally, Bob made the change. Have I seen that Bob made the change? The software should be able to do all that for me when we're talking digitally.
Right.
Agreed.
But have we updated our processes so that it happens and I get comfortable with it and I know I didn't miss something? Because that's the fear. That's the thing that's going to motivate people to slow down the change or release process. I need time to review it. I don't know what changed. Wait, the tools could tell us that. It's just, this is why we need to work through these things, I think.
No, I think you're right. And I think we laughingly said, like, we're part of the problem, but we're also part of the solution, right? Because you can't just go full bore making changes without having some, getting back to our AI example, having some oversight and being like, but no, it was because this is, a space implementation and we don't use grease in that. It's, so it's, there has to be that feedback loop. And you're right, the digital tools can tell us that, right? I mean, how many times have we, in the order of our business, like, been changing the same document and says, hey, Jonathan made a comment on this, or Jonathan changed this. Like, are you okay? So yes, the tools can tell us, but again, it's on us to be aware and engage with that.
So it's a paired mentoring situation where we, as the experienced, it makes me feel old when I say that. We
are old, Jennifer. We are.
I will just say it again. We, old people, as with a lot of experience, we adopt the mindset of collaboration and open-mindedness and curiosity, whereas the younger generations, with the open mindset and the curiosity, and I think the drive and capacity to do new and exciting things, they learn from us the balanced experience, and then we have a really good push and pull, and that builds something better than what we have today.
Right. Yep. And you're exactly right. It is paired mentoring, and they, the Gen Z or the tools that we're talking about, have to also allow for, they have to be accepting of that, right?
Right.
They have to be like, oh, okay, there is value in this experience. It's got to be a complete loop. So
yes.
And do you see this, Jennifer? I mean, I see it when we do consulting and companies are really trying to transform and they're trying to change the way they behave. Do you see this kind of process, like we're talking about right now, working, right? Is it the recipe for success, this sort of paired mentoring of put together the different mindsets, open everybody's mind, do some brainstorming, you know what I mean?
Yes. And we do it at Action Engineering a lot because I can control that situation.
Right.
And it works really well. And we dig into different perspectives that then we come up with more interesting and more efficient solutions. So I think that's one thing. However, when we're at customers, we're dealing with totally different cultures. We have a very family business like culture at Action Engineering, and it's small and diverse, and so we're trying. We have a very different culture than most of the companies we work with are large and hierarchical, and based on, well, I was told to do this and not that, so I don't do that. That is then, I think, where you have to build pockets of different cultures within implementation teams and brainstorming teams to build a sense of psychological safety in that team, so that then you can have that paired mentoring success. And because you're going to come into conflict, and the conflict resolution is super important, right? So you've got to be able to get in there, rumble around with all the disorder, and sort of, I have to sometimes go into my happy space and just be like, shut up, Jennifer, just don't say anything, because I want to control the situation, you know? And I think that's super hard. It's super hard for leaders, especially in hierarchical organizations that are bound by metrics and things like that they have to force down. So it's just, I think that is super challenging for large organizations to leverage. So to answer your question, Jonathan, we have more successes the smaller the organization, because it gets closer down to a tighter group knit of people. It becomes a little bit more family oriented. Everybody knows everybody's dog's name, and kids,
personalities, and
exactly. Yeah. And they also sort of are forced to work with each other and sort of overcome. Well, Jonathan, I don't like that you wore, your checked shirt today, but I'll get over it. Whatever it is. And I think that's important, because this stuff is so difficult, and it's so outside of the box of, where we're going to be in 20 years is so outside of the box of where we are now, that it just really requires a lot of listening to multiple perspectives and rapidly changing and being extremely flexible and willing to change quickly without taking everything personally.
And that's why I asked the question, right, as a little bit of a recipe for our audience, right? Because I think a lot of people are listening to the podcast and thinking about how they do it inside their organization, or, what is the key to doing some of the things we're talking about practically, right? If they want to bring in AI, if they want to shorten their change process, they want to do these things we're talking about, how do they make it happen? And I'd love to say, well, consultants are the answer, because that's what we do, but not just that. But the point you made, right, and that's the reason I asked, just to validate, we're all seeing it, is you have to change the way you talk about the problem. You have to create safe spaces for people to do these things. You have to be willing to look at the different perspectives and bring it all together. There's lots of that. And that's what's going to let you get down the road to some success. You got to have a goal in mind, but then you got to do it in a certain way. Otherwise, you may not get there. Yeah.
And we often recommend incremental project planning, which is our secret way to say you should do Agile. But
get some momentum, see some success, right? Get people to buy into the change, all those things.
And you've got rapid communications, and the conversations that you're having are more important than the contracts that you have in place from a perspective of, the hardcore deliverables. You've got to have conversations and rapidly change, which is hard.
And there's another piece of this. I want to bring it back to, what we said our theme would be today, talking about release and change process. I think you also have to do it in a cross-functional way. This is a part of that, the diversity of that team, right? Let's explain. There's a lot of angles you could take on that. Personality, all kinds of things. But function, right?
Functional diversity is important. Absolutely.
We're working on a change process, a release process. We typically have supply chain, engineering, manufacturing, all these people involved. Make sure they're at the table, because you won't really transform a process unless you're really looking at all the stakeholders of it.
Right. And one thing that I want to add to all of this is, depending on who our listeners are, some of those things are easier to achieve if you're in a leadership position, right? So if you're you're creating the team, okay, you can pull in cross-functional You can pull in people from other departments. You can pull in different age groups, different experience levels, et cetera. But I don't want to miss the point that like even if our listeners are not, and you're kind of bottom of the food chain or mid food chain, like there are like still being open to these are behavioral changes. They're not necessarily, and they can be endemic. Like it doesn't have to be you're leading a team. If you're given a problem to solve, be open to asking experienced folks, be open to asking folks in other departments, kind of create that environment, even if it's just around you. Because if you do that and somebody else does that, then you can slowly over time change the culture of a company. Maybe not entirely, but make it more open.
Absolutely. I've got a story. I got a story about that I want to share real quickly. Early in my career, I was given a little side project to do when we were still using 2D and we were looking at 3D, right? And to the credit of the people that I worked for in a couple of different departments, they said, the right way to look at this little project, we've got a little project over here we need to do, kind of a discrete design thing. It's a little bit electrical, a little bit mechanical. For us, it always takes a long time. It was very hard because we had different departments. They said, why don't you and this other guy go solve this? You two young engineers, each of us had 2 or 3 years experience. You guys solve it. So we went out and we got a demo Unix station and got demo licenses of Pro-E. And he did some of the electrical design and I did some of the mechanical design. And we figured out how to work together quickly and get things out to the machine shop early. And like, we just threw all the rules out and we did a little project, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I won't say the organization adopted it. But what they did is they learned a lot from it. They were like, oh, well, here's what you guys did that was interesting that maybe we should look at.
Yeah. And I haven't nailed in on the right language, but like it's proof of concept first, then it's pilots, then it's production.
Right.
I don't know what the right words are, but you've got to have that, throw out all the rules, experiment first, then come back and systemize, then come back and production levelize. Okay, I need better words. But Jen, I think your point is absolutely accurate that any individual contributor, no matter how your role in the organization is still important because otherwise they wouldn't have hired you. So I think it's important to stay curious about anything digital because that one person, even if it's a receiving inspector who pulls in boxes from the dock, opens them up, and compares it to a packing slip, there's still digital efficiencies that could be leveraged, but that person knows how they open the boxes and compare the documents the best. And if we're not having them be curious about how to improve their own jobs, we don't win.
And I'm so glad that you picked up, like you used the word curious, because that's what I was thinking in my head too, is in your job, whatever your job is, always be curious, always be looking for, how could I be doing this better? How could we be doing this better? And, Jonathan, your story was a very good example, but it was still dictated by leadership. Hey, you guys go do this versus what? Well,
I didn't tell the whole story. Part of that was because they were tired of listening to the two of us talk about there's better tools out there.
That's a way that you can bring that to the organization as well. But like in your capacity, whatever your capacity is, to be able to say, look at a problem and say, hey, you know what? I know we have to do it this way. Let's you and I go experiment and do it this way and just, compare the two. Just be looking for opportunities that way. That's, Jennifer, you had mentioned a book, like years ago in my career, I read a book called like Stepping Up. And it was for somebody who was not in a managerial kind of position, but how you can affect change at every level. So
I think that's good. And that's a good note to kind of close on, is to let people be confident that they can impact change even at tiny little levels. I think that's a big deal.
That's right. Well, and it's almost essential that they take it from that perspective, right? I mean, the project might come from any number of angles. A leader might say, we need to do it. Somebody at the lowest level might say, I think we could improve. It will take everybody to get a good result out of that, right? I mean, because leaders have to make the space, sometimes the budget, the time, all those things for it to happen. But the people who have the knowledge, the practical, here's what would fix it, here's what would change it, here's why you can't do that, they've got to be bought in to it also. Otherwise, you just can't make it happen.
Not also. They actually have to be bought in first because otherwise they just say no. Yeah.
Well, but if you can, but we're all engineers, right? So if you're doing something off on the side and you bring it to them, there's proof. See, engineers love proof. So
True.
it's a stronger argument. But I do agree. It's as far as the whole, watching time, because last time our conversation went almost an hour. So trying to keep this one down a little bit. It probably is time to kind of wrap things up this time, but it's a good conversation. Jennifer, I hope you want to come back because we're having just really good conversations about the digital transformation and what it takes. And I feel like each time we dig in just a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And there's so many perspectives. So we should do this next time. We sort of started talking about the MBD and PLM crossover. I think that would be that boundary layer is really important.
Yes.
And I don't know what I recommend these days. I used to say work them together, but people can't do it. It's too hard.
I'm going to throw something out there.
Like in a greenfield way, work it together because I think it would be less traumatic.
I think it's work it from the angle that you think is going to help you, get to your result best, right? Because sometimes you have to work one and then back to the other, sometimes in parallel. And it's also, just be flexible about it. Go at it with something in mind. Make sure that you've got the support that you need and the membership on the team that you need, and then you'll work it out. You'll figure it out, right?
But you're not supposed to be answering this, Jonathan. We're going to be talking about this.
I know. You're right.
All she did was just, guarantee we're going to invite her back. So
it's a great topic, though.
Yes,
I love
it is a good topic. It is a good topic.
I'm going to open it up a little bit, right? So we're teed up for next time. It's about the interplay of all this digital and model-based data. Where should it live? Where does it live? What kind of boundaries does it have? Should it have those boundaries? That's a great one to dig into.
I agree. And matter of fact, it would be a great one for our listeners that are out there to contribute to. So as we're wrapping things up here, if you have any suggestions for that conversation or things that we didn't cover here or questions about what we did cover, please reach out and be part of the conversation. This is an exciting conversation, and it's one that's changing the way we do business. So be a part of it. And in the meantime, thank you very much, Jonathan, for joining me today, and Jennifer for joining us. It's been a great conversation. Everybody, you can find us on our website or where you usually get your podcasts. And until next time, stay sharp.
Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. If you have any questions about what we covered here around managing change, or if you would like to submit some questions to shape our next conversation with Jennifer Herron, where we talk about the overlap of PLM and MBD, leave a comment on our post or send an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate all the feedback we receive. So make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on our YouTube channel. Until next time, stay sharp.